Twitch streams. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started here. Switch over to slide view. All right, so welcome to CONDG, everybody. That is the you can't really see it because I'm in the way, but that's the full URL there at the bottom of the screen. But if you go up to condig.org, that'll take you to our meetup. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. Check out Facebook so you won't miss a single second of all the great stuff that CONDG is doing, when sessions are happening, and so on. So make sure to subscribe to those. A shout out to G2O. We are not able to meet in person, but they have been such great partners to us that I still wanted to give them a shout out. They've done a great job of providing us food and a place so we don't have to meet in the parking lot, that kind of stuff. So appreciate them. So just want to give them a shout out. We also will have raffle prizes again this month. So we've got a JetBrains license, and I was able to scrounge together a little bit of. I looked through the swag closet here at the Central Ohio Couchbase headquarters, and I was able to find some cool stuff. So I will mail that at my own expense to you if you're in the United States. So we have some prizes. Anyone who enters the Twitch chat will be entered automatically. You get one entry max, and you must be present to win at the end of the session. So if you haven't said hello in the Twitch chat yet, please go and do that now. That will automatically enter you just by saying hello. So make sure to do that anytime during the course of the session. I want to promote some other groups in the area, and I have looked into them. And it looks like the Azure group, Central Azure group, is they met April 13th virtually, so they are doing virtual meetups. So you want to check that out if you're interested in Azure cloud type stuff. Go check out coazure.org, see when their next meetup is. They met on Microsoft Teams last time, so I don't know if they're going to do that again or not, but definitely check out their meetup there. Columbus App Dev User Group, they also had a virtual meetup recently on Teams, a combination Teams and Twitch. So you definitely want to check them out, see if they're having another meetup coming up soon. Go to columbusappdevusergroup.com to find out their information. They also have a meetup account and a Twitter account. Go check that out, see what they're up to. The Buckeye SharePoint User Group, I had a little less luck finding out what they were up to last month, but if you're into SharePoint, you want to check out buckeyespug.com. They usually meet on the third Thursdays at the Microsoft office. Of course, they're not doing that right now, but I don't know if they're doing anything virtual or not. So definitely want to check them out if you're into SharePoint. And if you are in SharePoint, I'm sorry. But if you're into it, go to that user group there. Pass is also in Columbus. You can check out columbus.sqlpass.org. I couldn't find information about their last meetup, so I don't know if they've gone virtual or if they're postponing or what. But if you're into SQL Server, database stuff, go check out columbus.sqlpass.org. And they usually meet second Thursday of the month at IGS. But again, they're not going to be at IGS. So if they're meeting virtually. It might be second Thursday. It might not be. Don't know. Go check it out there. Let's Talk IT Columbus. This is a sort of a user group for tech professionals about topics that are not technical skills. So it's an interesting, relatively new user group in the area. You want to check that out. You're going to go to, you can kind of see the URL at the bottom there. It's meetup.com/Let's Talk IT Columbus. And go check that out. I don't know if they're meeting virtually or not, but you want to go to that meetup site and get information. You can also email Aaron Petrie. That's aaron.petrie@improving.com if you have more information about that. Thank you, Integer Man, for posting a link there in the chat. So you don't have to copy it down yourself. You can just click that link and go check them out. All right, I threw this slide in here. I hope my fellow organizers didn't mind me doing this because I figured since we're meeting on Twitch, I'd want to promote this. There's an upcoming conference called the Live Coders Conference. This is a team here on Twitch that does live coding presentations, and this is a conference they're putting together. They did this one a couple weeks back, and they're doing another one again in June. So for more information on that, you want to go to livecoders.dev and just check out the Live Coders team. But the conference coming up in June, you don't want to miss it. Really great stuff. If you didn't see it, it was featured on the Twitch homepage. There were like 13,000, 16,000 people at some point in that conference. So that was a big deal. You definitely want to go and check that out. All right, upcoming meetings for CONDG. So for the near future, I guess we're going to keep going virtual until we're allowed to, or it's recommended that we can go and meet in person again. So for the near future, just plan on these being virtual. I don't know if they're going to be on my Twitch every time. I'm just kind of playing it by ear at this point. This last one was on Twitch. The video is available on YouTube. We'll do the same thing with this meetup. So this meeting is GraphQL for .NET with Baskar, and he is standing by on Zoom to start presenting that. Next month, it will be Seth Petrie Johnson presenting on securing your API endpoints. I've seen this one before at CodeMash, I believe. It's a really great presentation, so you definitely want to check that out. What YouTube account? It is my personal YouTube account. I think I shared the link to that on the meetup.com page, so you can go find that on meetup.com. Just check out the past events. I believe the link is in there. And I believe Baskar has also agreed to share the slides for this presentation. So we'll have those available as well. And then other ones coming up. So we got some TBD slots on there. If you have a presentation you want to present, an upcoming meeting, please let one of us know. Just throw it out in the chat there. You can also email any one of us, and we'll work that out with you. If you have an idea or someone you want to present, since we're meeting virtually, it's a little easier for us to get people who are normally not accessible, people who are out of town, for instance. So if you have a topic you want to hear more about, or a speaker you want to hear from, or ideally both, please let us know, and we can reach out to them. We have some channels available to us to reach some speakers. Probably can't get Scott Hanselman, for instance, but someone who normally wouldn't be able to make it to Columbus, we can make that happen. Question about lightning talks. So lightning talks are a series of like 10-minute presentations. We usually have 5 or 6 of them in a night. Those come up in July. We haven't yet asked for submissions on those. We'll start doing that next meeting, so keep an eye out for that. But we have, as you can see there, 3 or 4 slots to fill. So you'll definitely want to let us know if there's any topics, speakers, things you want to hear about. That's what's coming up. All right. If you're looking for work, or if you're hiring, normally we ask you if you're hiring to raise your hand. We can't really do that here. You can type "raise hand" in the chat there on Twitch. Another way you can do this, if you want to be more discreet, that's totally fine. You can email me, and I can act as kind of a broker. I did this last month, and I was able to connect different people who had resumes with companies who are hiring. So you're welcome to use me as sort of a go-between to keep this discreet. It's totally fine. If you don't want to announce to the world that you're looking for a job while your employer may be watching this, you can email me at mgroves.com. I'm happy to make that connection. So you can also throw it in the chat there and just say, hey, I'm hiring. You send me a message or email me. Totally allowed. That's totally fine by me if you want to do that. If you are comfortable with saying, hey, I'm looking for a position, you can throw it in the chat as well. But please, if you want to be a little more discreet, a little more behind the scenes about that, totally fine. You can email me, and I'm happy to make that connection. No finder's fee. Absolutely free service I'm providing because we're not able to do this in person. Okay, and you can also help if you're interested in helping organize the group in some fashion. Maybe help us run our Twitter account, or spruce up our meetup.com, or whatever you want to do. We're always looking for people to help. These are your organizers right there on the screen. So if you want to reach out to one of us, we're happy to discuss things you can do to help us out, or whatever. If you just want to get involved, let one of us know. You can email me, for instance, my same email address there, or into German here. Matt Eland is also available. I don't know if anyone else is lurking from the group out there in Twitch chat land, but you can contact any of us. Okay, and before we start, I just want to point out one more time that if you want to ask a question or leave a comment. So Baskar has kind of asked for me to save those until the end. But if you think of something during the session, go ahead and just leave a message right here in the Twitch chat. This is what it looks like. I put a red arrow there to the chat there. Just put that right there. So I'm saying this for people who have never used Twitch before. I'm guessing many of you have, but just in case you haven't, that's how you can ask it on Twitch. Just leave a comment there. If you don't want to use a Twitch account or don't want to log in a Twitch account, that's totally fine. You can also go to the meetup.com page. And so I've created a nice little short link there. So Matt, if you could also type that into the chat for people's convenience. Although if you're already on the chat, I guess, I don't know. But anyway, bit.ly/CONDG April 2020. Don't forget the casing there. Go and leave a comment on the meetup.com page. I'll be monitoring that during the presentation. So if you have a question or comment, and I can read that on the stream towards the end of the session. So there's the link there. The link might still work even if you're not logged in. So there you go. That's how you can ask a question if you don't have or don't want a Twitch account. All right, I think that is it. So right now I'm going to hand it over to Baskar. So go ahead and you can unmute yourself there, Baskar, and I'll put you on the screen here. Okay, and there I'll unmute Baskar so we can hear Baskar now. So why don't you just say a few words there, Baskar?
Yeah, thank you all for joining today. And
Okay.
thank you,
Hopefully
Matt.
everybody can hear that. So I'm going to take myself off now, and I'll hand it over to you, Baskar, to talk about some GraphQL.
Sure. All right. Thank you all for joining today. And this session, today's talk will be more about GraphQL on a beginner level. So before we go into the talk, I just want to give a brief intro about me. So I'm Baskar Rao, and you can find me on Twitter as Baskar Mib, and you can also find me on GitHub using the same. I'm an Auth0 ambassador, and I also represent, and I'm also part of Cloudinary Media Developer Experts Group. And apart from that, I also run a meetup as well as a conference called JavaScript and Friends. So that's a brief intro about me. So I don't want to waste more time telling about me. So today's agenda will go about a brief history about various architectures we had, and then we will go about like what is a brief overview about GraphQL and what are all the various platforms which currently support GraphQL. And lastly, we will see a small demo using a .NET Core application, which is developed using open project in GitHub. So after that, I will share some resources which you can use for further learning GraphQL. So there are common misconceptions about GraphQL. The moment someone tells about GraphQL, everyone believes that GraphQL and Graph database are same, but Graph database and GraphQL are not the same, right? And other common misconception is like many people think that GraphQL is a framework. So here I have Carlos. Recently, he tweeted telling because he is one of a GraphQL meetup organizer based out of Hong Kong, and he speaks more on GraphQL topics. So many times he has been constantly hearing that people tell him that GraphQL is a framework. So he started yelling out like, "No, GraphQL is not a framework, right? It's a specification." So that's when I noticed, and I told him like, "Yes, it's not a framework, but it is more like a spec, right? If uh, you have an OAuth spec or you have an SSO spec. So similarly, GraphQL is a specification. So, and it is not tied to one single language. It's not that GraphQL has to be used only for JavaScript applications. You can use GraphQL for .NET or any language. So it's not language dependent. So that's why we told like it is a specification. So going behind the history of architectures, like the most common thing every development team wants to handle is like we want to have performance of our applications should be really very fast, right? We have to have very uh, less response time between client and server. So to do that, we started like we had earlier desktop applications, and then it used to call the database. Then we evolved with mobile applications, right? And as more and more devices and applications got increased, uh, we started adding APIs in the middle. And even though we start adding APIs, we scale them out, uh, we increase the number based on load. But still, there is a common challenge for applications. When there is a less network or less bandwidth, you are going to face low response times because there is an increased round trip between the client and server, right? So even though those that is a common problem, the response time has been limited between client and servers. So for that, we started doing various architecture revamps. We moved from monolithic APIs to SOA-based APIs, and then today we started using microservice and REST APIs. And I don't want to say GraphQL is future because this talk is a similar talk which I gave in Code Palooza last year, but GraphQL is almost in present now. So, uh, but still I had it in the future side. And we are also using gRPC now. So these are all various architectures we keep evolving. But why do we do all these changes? The main reason to do all these changes is to just increase our response time. We have to make our applications faster. We want to make the maintenance of our applications easier, right? So you can tell me that I can use REST APIs, and with REST APIs, we can still make or still meet application performance. But with microservices, if you are not managing it properly, over time, the number of microservices keeps on increasing, and it will again give certain problems for maintenance. So what are the common problems we generally have in REST APIs? So whenever you change some functionalities, you have change in your endpoints, or there are, as I told, you have different clients. You have a mobile application, you have a desktop application, and you have some IoT devices. Each device will be calling your APIs. So you should not maintain an API in such a way that if you want to do some change for your IoT device alone, that change in today's world, it will be consumed even by the desktop application or even by the mobile application. So to do that, if you want to divide the methods between your desktop, mobile, and IoT, you will end up defining n number of methods. So you will say like from whenever I call from desktop, call this controller method, or whenever I call from mobile, call this method, and IoT device, call this method, right? So that is a common problem which we have today. And we might be either getting a complete information of the database. For example, your desktop application might require 15 properties, whereas mobile might require only 5 properties. Our IoT device, even it would require just very less number of properties. But still, our API methods will try to fetch all the properties, and we use some mapper methods in the front end just to make sure that we only expose the required properties for those devices. So that is also a problem. And then coming to documentation, if you want to develop documentation for your APIs, you have to either include Swagger in your .NET APIs. That way you can get .NET related documentation for your APIs, right? So these are all different problems which we have today. And these can be resolved using GraphQL. So as I told, if you have a desktop application and if you are having a server, you might be using one endpoint for desktop application and you might be using another endpoint for your mobile application, right? So if we get a change in any one of the method, for let's say I want to add a new property, but that property needs to be given only for the desktop application, then we end up changing the view models of the desktop application, and we end up if you have to propagate the same property to the mobile, you have to change the view model of mobile, and then you will be changing the map methods, So as such, you as the number of layers you have in your application, you will be you will be changing all those layers, and you will be ending up with changes to end methods and uh, specific specifically you might keep on adding multiple endpoints. So these problems we can rectify using GraphQL. And another common scenario is, uh, as I told, you might be adding multiple endpoints doing the same functionalities. So all these things can be reduced with GraphQL. So a brief overview of GraphQL. GraphQL is basically maintained and open source by Facebook engineers, and it's a declarative data query language, meaning you specify upfront what you need, right? So whatever the client tells, the client will get only those. It will not get any other added information. And with that, you can also reduce some round trips between servers. For example, typically whenever we do something like an authentication, and then um, if you are trying to get uh, let's say you're having a books, and if you're trying to get a books which are present under your cart, so basically your application will try to do a request for fetching your user information first, and then it will try to fetch the number of books which are present under your particular user account. So that way you can see that you have two requests going on, right? So these things can be reduced with GraphQL using a single request. And you can also change the methods easily, and it can be implemented in any language of choice and any architecture of choice. So there is no specific um, hard and fast rule that you have to do only this particular language or this particular way of building your APIs. You can implement your own architecture, but yeah, as long as you are maintaining the the spec defined, you will get easy, or you will be adhering to the GraphQL specification. So as of this talk, you can use GraphQL with all these languages. You can develop GraphQL APIs using C#, .NET, Clojure, Elixir, Erlang, and all those languages. But many times, if we say GraphQL, everyone will think that GraphQL is primarily used only by JavaScript applications using Express APIs and all those stuff. But you can use GraphQL for .NET-based applications as well. So the main benefit of using GraphQL is that you are more into schema-based development, meaning you will first develop your schema, and based on the schema, you will finalize that, okay, my application will be returning only these properties, right? So for that, your presentation, your front-end team will also have upfront information on what are all the properties they are going to get from your API. Usually they have to depend on the middleware team to know or to proceed their development. Whenever middleware team do some changes, they have to keep doing the change. But in GraphQL, everyone will come together and decide the schema first, so that once you have identified the schema, all the teams can work parallelly. So traditionally, if you are using SQL, you might be having a client application, and you might be using an API to send SQL queries. And SQL queries you can run only against a database. But with GraphQL, you can run your GraphQL query against an API, and the API can fetch you information from a database, or it can fetch you information from other API, or it can fetch information from file system, file storage, anything. So you can you can you can basically fetch information from any resource which is available on the internet. So if you are coming from an SQL background, how you will understand GraphQL, right? In SQL, we use the term select for selecting the items from the table, whereas in GraphQL, we call them as query. What we do in SQL as insert, update, and delete, in GraphQL, you will do them as mutation. And in GraphQL, there is an additional property or keyword called subscription, which you can use to basically, if you are having multiple clients and each client can subscribe to an event, And whenever there is an update to that property or table, your clients can get notified if they are subscribed to that particular mutation. So that we can do using subscription. We can also do subscription based development in SQL, but for that we have to depend, either we have to make SQL to send the change notification, and using the change notifications, you can use an API in your .NET environment, and then the .NET environment can invoke SignalR uh, to send the information to client. We can do that way in SQL. Whereas in GraphQL, it is inbuilt. You can do it through subscription. So how do you send a query in GraphQL? So if you are able to see this picture, uh, this is in GraphQL, you can query database by sending information as part of a JSON body. You can just send the query name as part of as a JSON, and if we invoke, you will get the response from the API. And usually the response is mentioned as part of the data field. Since this is using .NET as a background to develop the GraphQL API, you might have these additional properties like extensions. But if you are using other languages, you will have other properties over there. But the data is going to remain common between any language. So here what we're doing is like we are sending a query called hello, and the API sends a response telling hello, like CONDG. So in GraphQL, you can basically send queries, or you can group a set of fields. For example, you can define a fragment. So with fragments, you can group set of fields. And when you run those query, you can basically just mention the fragment. So it will be very useful when if you are going to have nested queries. So that time, instead of repeating the same fields, you can use the fragment to define those group of fields. So here we have defined a fragment called book details, and as part of the fragment, we are telling that return me these properties: ID, name, and genre, right? And as part of the books query, we are just mentioning the fragment name instead of mentioning each fields individually. So if we use three dots, that is where a fragment will be used. So the whole set is a query, including the upper section and the fragment section. So if we don't include the fragment section when we send the query, the upper query will not get resolved. It will throw an error. So you have to send the complete fragment as well as part of your query. So if you are from SQL world, you'll be using like select column names from table, and you will mention your var class. If you want to do the same in GraphQL, you will just say provide the query name here, which is an employee, and you have to pass the IDs in bracket. So this particular query takes in an employee ID and of value 5, and we are telling return the employee ID and first name. So this is how you can translate, or when you are trying to write your first query, you can try to use this particular syntax when you are getting started with GraphQL. So as I told, you can use mutation. So in GraphQL, all insertions, updations, and deletions, everything is done using mutation. So with mutation here, whenever you want to execute a mutation, you will give the keyword as mutation, and then you will mention the corresponding mutation name. So here we have given the mutation name as add author, and we are saying we are providing a name of the author, and once it is added successfully, we are telling that give me the name and ID which is generated at the API end. So when I run this particular mutation, we will get the name and the ID which is generated at the API level. So you can mention as many number of fields as you want after doing a mutation. So, and subscriptions, as I told, subscriptions are the way you can use to detect the changes which are happening to your data. So for example, you can use the subscription to develop chat-based applications, or if you remember Facebook, right? The moment someone posts something, you are a client, and when you see that update on your timeline, you can see that the number of likes or the other shares will keep on getting increasing, right? So all those is done using subscriptions. The client uses it gets subscribed to that particular entity, and when there are any changes to that particular post, it will get updated in the UI. So this way we can get real-time updates using subscription. So when you want to when you want a client to subscribe to a particular mutation, you will just give the subscription name, and you will mention the corresponding subscription which we have defined. So I will show all these things in the code. This is just a brief overview for now. So now that you know what are all the different keywords that we use with GraphQL, they are the query, mutation, and subscription. So what forms the GraphQL API? So in the API, you will define a schema, and you will include your query, mutation, and subscription, and then you will define your types. So as we told, GraphQL is a schema-based development. So when you fix your schema, you are going to define types for your API. So let's say you're going to have books and authors, then you will define type called book and author. So under the type book, you will mention all your proper fields of book, and under the type author, you will mention all the fields of which are part of author. And once you define the schema, the queries, the mutation, and subscription, uh, basically the API is going to use a resolver method. So what is a resolver is whatever query we are going to send in the front end. So in the query, let's say I'm telling us hello, right? So if I send the query as hello in the API, there will be a resolver which will be mapped to that particular query. So when it receives that particular keyword, the resolver will execute that particular method or logic which you have defined in your implementation. So all these tied together will interact with your data source. So your schema or query or the types, this layer will not have any interaction with your database. It is only your resolvers which is going to interact with the data source. So this is the entire layers or main parts which will be present inside your GraphQL API. So there are different platforms today. You can do GraphQL based development. There are three different clients. For if you see, GraphQL is primarily or more used by React and React Native world. But as I told, it's not that they are only for JavaScript world. You can use GraphQL for other applications as well. And Facebook has its own GraphQL client called Relay, which you can use to send GraphQL based queries. And you can also, another popular one is Apollo client. And you can also use Apollo GraphQL server for developments. And you can also use AWS Amplify for API development. And there is another cloud provider called Hasura. You can use that as well to develop your own GraphQL APIs. And recently, there is one more addition called Fauna. You can use FaunaDB as well to develop GraphQL based APIs. But all these, which I have mentioned, Apollo, AWS Amplify, Hasura, or Fauna, they are all primarily JavaScript based. I have not tested those platforms with with .NET till now. So I'll come to this slide later. So now that you have a basic understanding of the GraphQL layers, I will just open the code. I hope you are able to see the code fine. So in this particular solution, we have a controller, which is a GraphQL controller, and we have a database which has our types. So basically we have the types over here, types here. And so the author, we have all these fields, and as part of book, we have the fields like ID, name, genre, author ID. So if you notice these, all these types we are implementing using, or we are using GraphQL.types. So if you want, so this is my book class, and if I want to add this as an GraphQL type, I have to basically define a class called book type, and it implements using object graph type. So this object graph type is part of your GraphQL types. And we can mention the class. So with that, we are telling, so whenever whenever there is a request for name, we are telling you resolve it with o.name. And we are also mapping each fields for book type with the actual class. So this way we define our type. In the same way we have the author. So we have public class author with the fields, and we define the object graph type of which includes the author class, and we define the author type. And here also we map these notations. So whenever there is a request, map it with o.id, which is basically the author.id. So that is the types which we have defined. And if we come to the controller, so basically in the controller, we have to inject the schema, and we have to inject our author details. In this example, this is a small example which I have built for subscription, where if we add an author, we are going to get a response to the client telling that the author is added. So that is why we have included it as a subscription. So as I told, whenever we define our controller, in the controller, we are basically going to define the schema, and we are going to map it with the GraphQL schema. So when it comes to schema, you can develop your schema inline. So this is an inline schema where we mentioned that, okay, my schema, and it has a type called book, and it has a type called author, and it has a type called query. And under query, these are all my queries. Like I have a books query, I have an author with ID query, and I can return all the authors. And this message is basically used for our subscription. So you can either define your queries inline. So if we develop inline queries, and you can also develop your queries separately. So here I have defined the mutation as a class. So in author mutation class, we are basically telling it is part of graph type, and here we are defining that add author is a mutation, and it takes the argument called name. And once we receive that, we are telling to resolve it with by taking the name and then we are going to uh, call our method. So as I told, for each query, you will require your own resolver method. So here the resolver method is nothing but the add method. So if I send a mutation as add author with name and providing it a value, you will basically get an ID back. So this add author and name will go and map to our mutation, which is mentioned inside author mutation. So there is one drawback here that we whatever names we give for those queries, usually we have to try to maintain the same case when you are calling from the client. So this way you can map a mutation and the corresponding resolver method. And if you come to the schema, we have defined in a similar way the subscription. So to do a subscription, we have the author's subscription class, which basically uh, inherits from the object graph type. And what this method does is like here we are telling that author added is a subscription, and to that you have to resolve using these methods. And whenever someone is subscribed to that, you return the latest authors. So this is a type, this way we define the author subscription. I have actually written a blog post on subscription completely, like how you can get started based by installing the .NET Core related packages. It was part of C# Advent, which Matt Groves conducted last year. I hope he will be conducting again this year as well. So in that blog post, I have covered complete details on how you can add subscription. So now we have defined our subscription. So once we define our subscription, we have to make sure everything is mapped into our graph schema. So this way we say like the query is mapped to schema.query, and the mutation is mapped to the author mutation, and the subscription is mapped to author subscription. So once you have defined your graph schema, you will have your own individual query methods. So in the query, we can use the GraphQL metadata. So this is way the GraphQL API knows that whenever there is a query for books, it will come and execute this particular resolver method called getBooks. So there are two different ways you can do. You can use the GraphQL metadata, or you can use as we did for the mutation, where we mentioned the resolvers specifically. So all these queries will go into my query.cs file, and a mutation in the mutation file and subscriptions in the subscription file. And the schema will be part of schema.cs file. So here we are defining the types as book ID. So whatever we have mentioned here as schema, this is mapped inside under books as book type. So the fields which we mentioned here, they have to be mapped as a book type inside using this particular object graph type. So that goes for all the GraphQL related stuff inside GraphQL. And as part of the startup, if you want to use subscriptions, you have to enable asynchronous as true. And here under startup, we are basically registering all our methods or classes. So we have an author, and whenever there is a mention for author, we say it as resolve it with author details, and we add our graph schema. And this add GraphQL method, you are basically telling that if you want to enable the metrics in your output, you will give them as true. And if there are any exceptions while executing the query, you will mention them as true. So if I have the enable metrics as true, basically I'm going to get all these values. There anything under these extensions like tracing, the start time, and what are all the resolvers which were used. So for this mutation, the resolvers is path is add author, and then you can know like what is its type, what is the field name, and how much duration it took for that to execute. So all those time metrics, you can get the start time and end time. All these details you can get if you are enabling the enable metrics as true. But if you don't want to do that to in your, I think it is fine for development environment level. But if we do not enable that, we can always have it configurable. Such way we can avoid all these parameters as part of the resulting payload. So now we went through all the layers uh, of our solution. So from the controller, whenever we get a request, we are going to create an instance of the schema, and we are this piece is what is going to um, execute all our uh, graph queries which are received or sent to this particular API. So now let me run it. So this implementation, it also uses, so it also uses, you can use GraphQL, if you want to test your GraphQL queries. So the moment you add your GraphQL related packages, all these gets invoked automatically. So in your configuration, we have to mention usage of WebSockets to support subscription, and we have to basically give our API, like mention the route. So whenever there is a request for UI.graphiql, respond with the GraphQL endpoint, right? So this option will enable us the GraphQL endpoint, which we can use for testing the APIs. And here we are also telling, so all these are initial configuration stuff which we need to use. So these were taken from the GitHub GraphQL.net documentation. So you're basically saying we have to use the GraphQL with this particular graph schema, and we also need this middleware. So any of these lines, if we remove these two lines, then whatever the GraphQL implementation will not be working. So these two lines support the GraphQL implementation. So the WebSockets is primarily for subscriptions, and this use GraphQL is basically for all other, like the query, the mutations, which we do using GraphQL. So now we can just send a query. So in this you can just use the URL which comes in the .NET So we started this and it exposed as 5000 port. So I can basically use the same, and if I say like UI slash GraphQL, it will basically show me this playground which we can use to test our queries. So when we send this, we are basically, so what happens is like the moment when we send hello, it will basically go to the query.cs file, and here it will find the GraphQL metadata as hello, and whatever implementation which we have in hello, it is going to just return that. So that way we got the initial response. Now let me subscribe to an event. So for subscription, we'll use the keyword as subscription, and we mention the subscription name. So and what fields we want. So now the moment your client is subscribing for this event, you will get a positive response telling like your subscription data will appear after server is published. So now I will go here to the other window, and here I will run a mutation. Right. So here what we are telling is like when I add an author, I'm basically adding these particular details into a JSON file and then returning it back. So the moment I execute this mutation, it goes to our author mutation.cs file. And once it is added, we are basically, it will invoke our subscription. So here it added the author and gave us the ID. So now if we go to our subscription, you will basically see here the response that an author got added, and this is the ID and the name. So as the number of clients which get subscribed will increase, you can see like uh, here for now there are 2 subscribed, and one was basically from my last test, and they both got the data. So as long as there is a open clients, then it keeps getting those data. So let's add one more. So we get the other newly added author as well in our subscription. So in the logs, you can also find what are all those subscriptions which are getting created. So this way, here, if we want, we can have our the tracing mechanisms enabled, or they can always be removed by disabling it as part of our enable metrics. So this way, your client can always get response from the API whenever there is a new change added to the entities or the database fields. So that's a brief demo of this application. So I can also run a query. And here, so the moment we type a query, it will ask us, like you can see these red marks, that you have to mention the subfields which are part of that particular type. So let me go ahead. And run this query. So here we get our response of the books which we have. So all these are just inline dummy data. These are not interacting with the database, but just for the interest of demo, I had them created in memory. But the idea is that you can always have your query.cs go and call your database implementation methods over here. So this way you can map your queries, and you can also map resolvers for each level. So now right now I'm just using a single level, but if you want you can go to the author, and inside author I can find name and all the books written by this author. So as we nest through the layers, we can basically define the resolvers accordingly. So the other good thing about GraphQL is that we get the documentation with GraphQL inbuilt. So you can find what are all the queries which are defined in your schema. So here under query, I can find the author, authors, books, hello. So all these are different queries. And you can find the mutation here. So under mutation, I have a mutation called add author, and it basically returns the author type. And under subscription, we have an author added subscription, and it is of type message. So use under this message, we are basically giving the ID and name, which is getting returned in this particular subscription event. So that way we can always check the schema before, or it helps us to know what are all the uh, fields or properties that are present as part of a GraphQL API. So it's easier to develop documentation as well for the APIs. So with that said, this is a small demo which I had, and you can always go through all these references. If you want to understand more about GraphQL, you can go to graphql.org, and these are all other references which I have. And there is a there is a video in MSDN on GraphQL, and uh, it's by the code traveler. I just forgot his name, but I usually call him the code traveler, right? So if you want fellow other developers to follow who basically speak on GraphQL stuffs, you can always check out them on Twitter, Shruti and Carlos, another David. So all of them, they speak about GraphQL or they write about GraphQL. So they are some I follow to get updates on GraphQL based content. And this is a book you can always use to learn to get the basics. It's by Porcello and Alex Banks. It gives a basic overview about GraphQL. But this book is primarily on JavaScript using Express and other implementations. But if you want to understand the query language, you can always go through this book to get an initial understanding of the query language. And with that said, thank you, Matt and team, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. And I open it for questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Baskar. I think if we were in person, this would be the time for a round of applause. I guess I can do that by myself. Thank you very much, Baskar. So I've got some questions collected from the chat, some questions and comments.
Okay.
I do want to say, first of all, that if you want to get entered to the raffle, please leave a comment on Twitch, even if it's just the word hi. That'll get you entered into the raffle. And please, I need you to do that so you can get in, because I will cut that off here soon and start picking winners. But I have some questions and comments. So here's a comment earlier from Matt, Integer Man, in the chat there. He says he's worked on services before that needed to flood an external API with up to 20 requests for different pieces of related data. And GraphQL let him cut that down to about a total of 5 calls, including some for just authentication. So that's a validation there that the query nature of it lets you declare what you need up front in a relationship. So that's not really a question, it's just a comment saying
Right.
that GraphQL has been used successfully. So thank you for that comment. I also want to say thank you for the shout out. This is me personally. Thank you for the C# Advent shout out. That's something fun I like to do every year. So I will definitely be
Right.
doing that again. We have some plans. Calvin and I have some plans to make that even more interesting this year. There'll be the 4th one coming up. So look for that. Thank you for the shout outs. So I have some questions here. If anyone else
Yep.
has questions, please get them into the chat. I have a couple. I want to ask you, and maybe you can show this on the screen here again, because I had recently tried to tangle with GraphQL and .NET. What are the NuGet packages that you used to build your demo application here?
Sure. So the NuGet packages, let me open that. Let me stop this. So basically, like if you go to GraphQL.NET documentation, let me just open that. So it's graphql-net.github.io. So here under the docs, if you go to the getting started section, uh, so under installation, so basically you will go first add .NET add package GraphQL.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to enable subscriptions, then you will basically add subsequent fields or subsequent packages. So I had them on my blog. Let me, I didn't have it ready here. Yeah. So these are the packages which you will add if you want to enable subscriptions. So if you want to enable subscription, you will add graphql.server.transports.ASP.NET Core and transports.websockets. And if you want to use GraphIQL, then you will have to add graphql.server.ui.graphIQL. So
Okay, great.
add package GraphQL and all these for subscription.
Okay, and so a related question came in. Is this going to be available on GitHub? Your sample there, so we could take a look at the working sample that you've made.
Yes, yes, yeah, it is already there. Like it is there here. ASP.NET Core app.
Okay, so I will. Could you make sure to just send me that link?
Sure, sure. I will
So
send it to you.
I will add that to the meetup information on meetup.com.
Yep.
But there you go. That's where you can look at the sample right now. And I don't want to put you on the spot here, Baskar. You can say no if you want to, but will you make the slides available as well? There were a lot of great
Yeah,
links in there. Okay,
yeah.
great.
I'll give it. Yeah.
Okay, so you can send that to me or post it wherever, and I will update the meetup.com information with that.
Yep. Sure.
All right. Does anybody else have any? I'm seeing a lot of thank you, thanks, great presentation, nice, great job, Baskar. I'm seeing a lot of those comments there in the chat. Another great
Yep.
presentation just came in. So
Sure.
a lot of positive feedback there, Baskar. Does anybody else have any questions for Baskar right now? Of course, Baskar is always active on Twitter. You can ask him questions there. If you think of something that wakes you up in the middle of the night and you forgot to ask, you can always go and ask him on Twitter.
Yes.
And he's
Yeah.
he's a very active developer community member, so he's very accessible. But if you have any questions you want to ask him live right now, now is the time. Okay, going once, going twice. All right, so I'm going to switch over to just a view of Baskar here to fill up the screen. Just a better close-up picture of you, Baskar. All right, so at this point now, I just want to say one more time, these things I'm plugging in the chat, but if you are looking for work or you are hiring, please drop a comment into the chat there oh, you just drop off? I just stopped this video. If you're looking to hire or looking for a job, drop a message into the chat. And if you don't want to make that announcement here in public in front of the whole internet, you can email me at mgroves.com. I'm happy to make those connections more discreetly. And with that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. I think that's all the questions we have. We're going to go ahead and switch over. Let me just check the meetup.com site one more time. See if anything's come in. Doesn't look like it. Okay, so now this is your last chance to get those raffle entries in. Go ahead and leave a chat message there in Twitch, and that'll automatically enter you for some prizes. So first place prize is going to be a license, a free license from JetBrains for any one of the amazing JetBrains products. So we're talking ReSharper, certainly, if you're doing .NET and C#, but also things like PHP Storm, Writer, and all those sorts of great products that they have available. You get IntelliJ, etc. You can get a license for one of those for free. That's the first place prize. Integer Man says he abdicates his chance of winning. That's fine. I abdicate myself as well. So if I come up in the random draw, then I won't take the prize. Especially since second place prize I have right here with me. This is a little robot toy. It's called an Aaytee. This is a robot that can talk, dance, sing. It can respond to voice commands. It's a fun little toy. Comes with batteries. Oh no, the bot can't win either. Streamlabs can't win either. So this is being supplied courtesy of Couchbase, who is sponsoring this, my employer. I'm also going to throw in a Couchbase pen and a selection of amazing Couchbase stickers. I will ship them to you if you're in the United States. If you are not in the United States, I can't ship them to you. Sorry. We will pick somebody else. Okay, so what I've got going on here is this is a Couchbase server that has been recording all the chat messages that come in, and I've written a Couchbase query. This is the same thing I did last month. A Couchbase query that's going to pick everybody that's chatted since this meetup started, and it's going to order them randomly and pick one out of that list. So this is your last chance, last call, 5 seconds here, and then I will pick the second place winner first. You will get the toy robot shipped to you if you're in the United States. And so this is a SQL query here. But yeah, it's a document database, so all the data is JSON. It would be appropriate to do this with GraphQL. Yeah, it would be. I don't have a GraphQL thing set up yet because I just now saw Baskar's demo, and so I will have to build that. But yes, GraphQL will be good with the Couchbase backend, of course. All right. We've got some auto mod messages. Looks like this is a little typo. I'm going to allow that one. All right, so last call. Going once. Going twice. Okay, the second place winner of the robot is... I'm totally your data type. So, are you here on totally data type? Because you actually won last month. If you want the robot really badly, I will send it to you, but I'll also give you the chance to abdicate that since you already won last month. Okay, we'll do another draw. Thank you for that. I'm totally data type. You're just very lucky. You won a prize the very first time you created a Twitch account, so I appreciate that. All right, we'll do another draw, and the winner is Tahansen43206. Are you still around, Tahansen43206? You must be present to win because I need your contact info for the shipping, for your address to ship it to. So to Hansen 43206, are you still around? I know you're in German Village, so this is a very inexpensive delivery for me to mail. And it'll reach you very quickly. All right, to Hansen, you are here. Okay, congratulations. You win a toy robot and a Couchbase sticker pack. I will just email me if you would please. It's me@mgroves.com. Send me your shipping information and I will ship you this prize. So congratulations. Okay. And next is the JetBrains license. This is, again, a free license for any of the JetBrains products. I will email this to you, so you will get a code from me. So I need your email address to send this to you. So again, you must be present to win. All right, here we go. Random draw. Drum roll, please. Can you give us a drum roll, Baskar?
Yeah.
I'll take that as a no. All right, here we go. Ready? And it's me. I win the prize. All right. Congratulations, me. Nope. I abdicate. I already have JetBrains licenses anyway. So we will try it again and pick another winner. And it is the Amazing Bee Wood. The Amazing Bee Wood. Are you still around? Are you still around, the Amazing Bee Wood? Yes, he is. Oh, congratulations, the Amazing Bee Wood. You win a JetBrains prize. Please email me@mgroves.com, and so I have your email address, and I will send you this prize. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it. I'll hang around here for another few minutes or so as we wind down. But make sure to check out condig.org and follow Condig on Twitter and Facebook and whatnot, so we can let you know what's coming up next, where it's going to be hosted, how it's going to work, all those sorts of things. I appreciate everybody coming by. Fun Codex 101. Yes, we are. I don't know if I took down your information, but if you're looking for a job, you can put your information here. If anyone else is hiring, you can also email me, me@mgrows.com, and I will put you in touch with anybody who is hiring right now. So my company is hiring, so you can go to couchbase.com, see some positions there. But I also want to put you in touch with anybody else, especially in the Columbus area, who is hiring. So you can definitely contact me, and I will make that connection. Or like someone else had done earlier, you can drop your LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn link there in the chat, and let people know that you're looking. Especially .NET, right? This is a .NET group, but if you're looking for anything, right, we're happy to put you in touch with whoever's looking for a position. All right. So this is just kind of the hangout period after the meeting normally, where people are starting to pack up the leftovers and do a little cleanup, put all the chairs back in place. We normally meet fourth Thursday at the G2O offices. That's in Central Ohio, up there near, oh geez, what is it? Up near Westerville, I guess, or Worthington area.
So I think you will be coming to Dublin.
I'll be coming to Dublin?
Yeah.
Why is
Because
that?
G2 has signed a new lease in Dublin.
Oh, okay. So they're moving their offices.
They might be moving once they open.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Hopefully sooner than later, right? But yeah, Ohio, it's cold up here. Hey, Dota 2 Attitude, good to see you. It's a little cold right now. It's sort of late spring, middle of spring, I guess. Kind of. It's been a little cold, but it's getting warmer for sure. Normally our chairs are strewn about around the ground by the end. Yeah, it's like a wrestling match, professional wrestling. It's just chairs everywhere. Everyone's fighting over the last bit of Qdoba. Yeah. Next month is Seth Petrie Johnson. I would say do not miss this one. It is absolutely a terrific presentation. And Seth is I used to work for Seth. Full disclosure, I don't work for him anymore, so you can take my opinion as completely honest now. He's an amazing guy, incredibly intelligent, entertaining, and it's really good stuff. The API. I actually worked with Seth on some API stuff back in the day. So this is just a topic that's near and dear to me, and I've seen it before. Even though I've seen it at least once, maybe even twice, I will enjoy watching it a third time because he works really hard in his presentations. Probably too hard, but it's really, really good. Thank you for sending the email there to Hansen 43206. So I will get that shipped out as soon as I can. Since you're in the same city, fortunately, that should be a pretty easy thing to send an email to, or send that package to you. All right, so